All right, Bingers, welcome back to Binge Guide, the next show. And you know what that means. We're here to help you decide what to watch next.
Exactly.
And we're keeping our eyes on a new gangster film. It's called The Alto Knights, and it's generating some serious buzz because it's got Robert De Niro back in the gangster genre.
Always good to see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Always a good thing, right? But here's the thing. He's not just playing one mob boss. He's playing two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Vito Genovese and Frank Costello.
Yeah.
Two real-life figures from Mafia history.
Talk about a challenge.
Right. We had to dig into this.
Okay.
So we've got a whole stack of sources here. Articles, interviews, all the juicy details. We're going to break it all down for you.
Should be interesting to see how he pulls off playing these two very different personalities. Costello, he was known as the prime minister of the underworld. Very strategic diplomatic. But Genovese, well, he was a whole different story. Much more impulsive, prone to violence. You know, a real hothead.
It's like De Niro's playing both sides of the same coin,
Right.
like two sides of the mafia.
Yeah, absolutely. And to really get the film, we need to understand their real-life rivalry. I mean, these guys came up together, but their paths diverged. Costello, he built his power through connections, politicians, judges, you know, the whole web of corruption. But Genovese, he was more about brute force intimidation, classic mob tactics.
So we've got this clash of styles, brains versus brawn.
Yeah.
And get this, there's this great story about how De Niro ended up playing both roles. So producer Irwin Winkler, he originally went to De Niro just to offer him the part of Costello.
Okay.
But they started talking about who could play Genovese. And right there in the middle of conversation, Winkler just blurts out, hey, why not have De Niro play both?
Wow, talk about a light bulb moment.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Totally spontaneous.
Yeah.
But it speaks to De Niro's range as an actor. I mean, taking on two completely different characters in the same film. That's no easy feat.
It'll be fascinating to see what Barry Levinson does with this. You know, he's worked with De Niro before, and he's got experience in the gangster genre. I mean, Bugsy, come on. That movie got a ton of Oscar nominations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So he knows what he's doing. But I wonder, will The Alto Knights be similar to his other films, or is he going to take a totally different approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we can't forget about the screenwriter, Nicholas Pileggi, the guy who wrote Goodfellas and Casino.
Oh, yeah, he knows a thing or two about mob stories.
He does. And I'm really interested to see if he'll explore the psychological side of these characters. You know, how their choices affect them, the guilt, the paranoia, all of that. And with De Niro playing both roles, it's like we'll be seeing those internal struggles play out on screen.
And this rivalry wasn't just some war of words. Things got real violent. In 1957, Genovese ordered a hit on Costello, a full-blown assassination attempt.
Seriously?
Yeah. There's even a photo out there, De Niro as Costello, all battered and bloody after the attack.
That's intense. I mean, that kind of violence, it changes everything. I bet the film really leans into the consequences of those actions.
Oh, definitely. And that attempted assassination, it wasn't just personal. It shifted the entire power structure of the Mafia, pushed Costello into retirement, cemented Genovese's position at the top.
So this is more than just a gangster flick. It's a glimpse into a pivotal moment in mob history, a story about how violence and betrayal shaped organized crime in America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the double De Niro situation, the historical context, and the dream team of Levinson and Pileggi behind the scenes. But what about the rest of the cast and crew?
Well, according to Wikipedia, the supporting cast includes some familiar faces: Debra Messing, Cosmo Jarvis, Catherine Narducci, and Michael Rispoli. And the music is by David Fleming.
The guy who did Dune, Part 2.
That's him. And The Last of Us, he's been on a roll lately, so the soundtrack should be epic.
Yeah, shaping up to be quite a production.
Yeah.
Hold on a sec. I'm seeing some stuff here about production problems and a change in the release date.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, it looks like The Alto Knights was originally supposed to come out in 2024,
Yeah.
but it got pushed back because of the Hollywood strikes.
Yeah.
It's now scheduled to premiere on March 21st, 2025.
Yeah, those strikes really threw a wrench into things for everyone. So we've got a little over a month before we can actually see this double De Niro masterpiece.
Yeah, but there's another twist, and it's not a good one. I'm seeing some concerning numbers about the film's budget and projected box office performance.
What are we talking about here?
Well, according to World of Real, the film has a budget of $50 million, which is a lot. But early tracking suggests a surprisingly low opening weekend of just $3 million.
Whoa, that's a huge difference. I mean, for a De Niro mob film, especially one with all this buzz, those projections are definitely raising some eyebrows.
Right, and this raises a big question for our listeners. Knowing this information, how will you approach watching The Alto Knights? Are you still going to rush to the theater, or are you going to wait and see how it does and maybe catch it on streaming later?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, these days, the lines between theatrical releases and streaming are getting blurrier and blurrier. Studios are constantly adjusting their strategies based on how films perform, how critics react, and what audiences are saying.
So if you had to predict, when do you think we might see the Alto Knights available for home viewing?
That's tough to say. But if I had to guess, I'd say sometime in late spring or early summer. That would give it a decent run in theaters, but also capitalize on the summer blockbuster season, when people are looking for new releases to watch at home.
Makes sense. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at the trailer. See if it gives us any clues about the film's tone and style.
Okay, so the trailer, it really plays up the contrast. On one hand, you've got these glamorous shots of 1950s New York, those classic cars, the guys in their sharp suits, that whole gangster aesthetic.
It's giving me like Boardwalk Empire vibes with the vintage cars and the costumes.
Right, and apparently they went all out to recreate that era. They even shut down parts of Ohio to film some scenes. And they brought in this specialist to make sure all the cars look brand new, like they just rolled off the assembly line in the 50s.
Wow, that's dedication to detail. So they're really trying to immerse the viewers in that time period. But it's not all glitz and glamour, right? The trailer also hints at the darker side of this world.
Oh yeah, definitely. You get these flashes of violence, tense standoffs, and you can see the characters struggling with the consequences of their choices. There's this one line where De Niro, I'm assuming it's Costello, he says, "We just grew up together. I think he sometimes forgets where he comes from," and it just hits you with this feeling of betrayal, like this broken brotherhood is fueling their rivalry.
And that's where De Niro's dual performance becomes even more fascinating. He's not just playing two sides of conflict. He's embodying this internal struggle between loyalty and ambition, the pull of the past versus the desire for power.
Exactly. It adds this whole layer of complexity that you don't usually see in gangster films. We're not just watching two guys go head-to-head. We're watching one actor grapple with the duality of these characters.
Okay, so we've got historical drama, the double De Niro thing, the visual spectacle. But what about the overall tone? Is it a straight-up action flick? Or is there more to it?
Right. Based on the trailer. And knowing Levinson and Pileggi's work, I think it's going to be a character-driven story. But with some intense action sequences thrown in. Remember Levinson? He's known for really delving into the psychology of his characters. And Pileggi, he's great at exploring the moral gray areas of the criminal world.
Right. So it's not just about shootouts and car chases. It's about understanding what makes these guys tick, what leads them to make the choices they do, and the consequences that follow.
And speaking of choices and consequences, let's circle back to those box office projections for a minute. A $3 million opening weekend for a $50 million film. That's a pretty big gap.
It's definitely not the kind of start you'd expect for a movie with this much talent involved. I mean, do you think these low projections could change how the movie is released? Could we see the Alto Knights hitting streaming services sooner than expected?
It's possible. I mean, these days, the line between theatrical releases and streaming is becoming less and less clear. Studios are always adapting, trying to figure out the best way to get their movies in front of audiences.
So they might be thinking, hey, if this movie isn't performing well in theaters, let's get it on streaming ASAP.
Exactly. And, they're going to be looking at the numbers, trying to figure out the best strategy.
Yeah.
So if I had to guess, I'd say we might see the Alto Knights available for home viewing sometime in late spring or early summer.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Give it a chance in theaters, but then capitalize on the summer blockbuster season when everyone's looking for something new to watch.
Right. But before we jump ahead, let's talk about the bigger picture here. We've been focusing on the Genovese-Costello rivalry, but what about the broader implications of their story? That article we mentioned, the one about their history. It pointed out that the Genovese crime family is still active in New York City today.
Wow. So their legacy lives on, even after all these years.
Yeah, it makes you think about the lasting impact of organized crime and whether it's something that can ever truly be eliminated.
It's like a cycle that keeps repeating itself. Even after these powerful figures like Genovese and Costello are gone, the system they built, the power structures, they remain in place.
And that's what makes the Alto Knights so relevant. It's set in the 1950s, but it raises questions that are still important today about the influence of organized crime and its effect on society as a whole.
So we've got this historical, epic, double De Niro, amazing creative team, visuals that look incredible, thought-provoking themes. But now we need to talk about the big question, the one that's on everyone's mind. Should you watch the Alto Knights? I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? That's what we're here to help you figure out.
It's a tough one. There's a lot to consider. We've got De Niro pulling double duty, playing two incredibly complex characters. A director who's known for his deep dives into character psychology. A screenwriter with a proven track record in the gangster genre, and the visuals look absolutely stunning, like a time capsule back to the 1950s.
Right, but then there's that whole box office thing, those low projections. They definitely make you wonder if it's worth rushing to the theater on opening weekend.
I get it, it's a valid concern, but that's why we do these deep dives. We give you all the info, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you can make an informed decision.
We're not here to tell you what to think. We just want to empower you to make your own choices about what you watch.
So here's the deal. The Alto Knights premieres in theaters on March 21st, 2025. If you're a huge De Niro fan or you just can't resist a good gangster flick, you might want to catch it on the big screen.
But if you're on the fence because of those box office numbers, you could always wait and see how it plays out. It'll probably be on streaming platforms sometime in late spring or early summer, so you have another chance to check it out then.
And in the meantime, you could always revisit some of De Niro's classic gangster films like Goodfellas or Casino, or check out some of Barry Levinson's other work, Bugsy, Rain Man, just to get a feel for his style.
Great suggestions.
Yeah.
And hey, maybe by the time the Alto Knights hit streaming, we'll have even more insights to share, based on the reviews and what audiences are saying.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about film. It's a conversation that keeps evolving, and we're all part of it.
I like that. Well said. So we're going to leave you with one final thought to chew on. We talked a lot about the rivalry between Genovese and Costello, but we didn't really touch on how women are portrayed in gangster films. Will the Alto Knights fall into those same old tropes, the helpless moll, the long-suffering wife, or will it offer a fresh perspective?
That's a great question. And honestly, I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. But it's something to pay attention to, how Levinson and Pileggi handle that aspect of the story.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, really think about how women are represented in the Alto Knights. Do they have agency? Are they active participants in the plot? Do they break free from those stereotypical roles?
These are important questions to consider, not just for this film, but for the gangster genre as a whole.
Couldn't agree more. And that wraps up another episode of Binge Guide, the next show. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Alto Knights. We'll be back soon with another new release to help you decide what to watch next. Until then, happy binging.